Welcome to the podcast, Tomer.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Who are
Thank
you?
for having me.
Yeah.
Who am I? Wow, that's a question for the ages.
Yeah.
So I'm a software engineer from Israel. Been working for a bunch of companies. Most recently, I've been working for WeWork for the last year and a half. Before that, I worked for a company I hope some of your listeners may know called Wix, which is a website builder / publishing platform. A bit of scale, lots of backends, some microservices, some other interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I would say I have a passion for engineering and a disdain for stupidity and process.
Sounds healthy.
Yeah, it got me in trouble often enough. But yeah, this is kind of what I do. I've been programming for the better part of my life. I got to see a computer when I was a kid, and it was one of those moments that. And the second I laid eyes on, I think it might have very well have been a Commodore 64 back in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
I kind of knew I wanted to do that for the rest of my life, which is weird.
Yeah.
And what's even weirder is that I actually got to do that for the most part for the rest of my life. Yeah. That's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, and like I said before we started recording, we might as well start with what's freshest in our minds. You just had a presentation on microservices.
Yeah, it was a more of a retrospective than a how-to, really.
Yeah, and it seemed like it was something that interested a lot of people.
I was actually very surprised, not to mention gratified, that the room was packed to capacity and then some.
Yeah, they just kept coming in.
Yeah, it's weird, but cool. Yeah, and I think it's just timely because. If you look at sort of the hot topics in conferences over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, there was that heyday of microservices between, say, 2013 or so and 2017. Yeah. And then everyone kind of got fed up with the subject. So I think I just got the timing right in that fewer and fewer people are kind of talking about it, but because it became sort of uninteresting and commoditized, then it was a very good opportunity to kind of take a step back and look at it again, look at the subject, like what we've learned, what we've failed to learn, what we've yet to learn, and kind of make sense of it all. Yeah. And I think I just got the timing right, and that's why the room was packed. I don't think it's because of my beard or whatever it is. So I hope people got their money's worth out of the talk.
I felt like it. And I like the approach of sort of a retrospective. Yeah, and sort of the pros and cons as well.
Yeah, it just seemed like good timing for it, and I guess a lot of people agreed.
Yeah,
because everyone's kind of doing it, but at this point, everyone's kind of doing it, because it's easy. They don't spend as much time thinking about it, and there's still a lot of things that we as an industry get wrong, and it's a good opportunity to point them out so we can hopefully start fixing them.
Yeah, I also liked how you brought up this aspect of these are the things we usually tout as advantages of microservices.
Oh yeah,
and this is why we actually do it.
And in that respect, I'm totally an apostate. I have that tendency to just take what everyone is saying and then kick it a little bit. And this was a very good opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different reasons why people say microservices are useful. And then if you look at the sort of companies that actually employ microservices wholesale, you find that they tend to be either companies that are sort of experiencing hyper growth, like they've been successful, now they want to grow. And this is one of the things that enable them to do that. And then on the other hand, you have a lot of the most successful companies that have been doing it for years and years and are sort of ahead of the curve on how it's done. So Google is one really good example of this. They've been doing microservices for years. They just didn't call them that. And they've been doing containers and Docker for years and years. And they didn't really talk about that either. No. But they're ahead of the curve and sort of everyone is going in that direction. Yeah. So I think it's worth wondering why, what benefits does it really give? And beyond now that it's not sort of buzzing, like it's not trending, no one thinks microservices is like a hot topic anymore. It's actually a very good opportunity to, like we can stop, we can rediscuss this, we can totally ignore all the fluff, and we can actually take a long, hard look at what it gives us, what it costs us, and whether or not it's a useful architectural pattern. And I think it is.
Yeah.
The one thing I sort of didn't touch on this talk that I feel is worth exploring is the age-old question of, should you go microservices as a startup? You have a product, you're building it up, you're building the team up, you might have some seed funding, and you're starting to move. Should you build like a monolith or a microservice-based architecture? And a lot of the common wisdom is, as long as you're small or you're doing a well-defined thing, just build a monolith because it's easier. And I think that's actually missing the point. Monoliths aren't necessarily are easier to build. That's true, but I think it's more of an accident that they're easier to build. I think it has more to do with the fact that microservices used to be very hard to build. So even 5 years ago, everyone who was talking about building a microservice architecture would be talking about, what RPC subsystem should you build one? Should you pick like Thrift or Protobuf? How do you do circuit breaking? Should you do service discovery? How do you do schema management and versioning? All that stuff. All of these are maybe not yet, but are sort of getting to be solved problems. So it's that much easier. And especially as things get commoditized and as infrastructure sort of gets not only commoditized, but provided as a service. Like take Amazon Lambda, for instance. That's a canonical example. Essentially, Lambda is a microservice, and it's not entirely commoditized. It's not standardized. It's not yet fully trivial to build a system on top of just Lambdas, but it's getting there. Yeah. It's getting to the point where, not putting too fine a point on it, kind of like how today you'd have to be an idiot to start your startup and build your own colo data center or integration lab or whatnot, and not just use, GCP or EC2 or what have you. You kind of would have to be an idiot to do that, unless you have a very good reason, in which case you don't need me to tell you what to do. I think in a few years, you'd kind of have to be an idiot to want to build a monolithic app, because it's going to be as easy to just build it on top of some sort of computation substrate that we don't necessarily know yet, that we don't know what it would look like. Kind of like how Lambdas were unimaginable 10 years ago. Yeah. Not because the technology wasn't necessarily there, but because just the need for it wasn't there. And
maybe the thinking wasn't quite there either.
Exactly. So I think in 5 years, just asking the question, should I build it as a monolithic app, would be limited to almost like a niche of line of business, very small scale systems that there'll be less and less of, or maybe not, who knows? But even if there will be every bit as need for those types of small systems as there is today, there will probably be much easier and cheaper options in how to build them than, go set up your server, fire off Postgres and just write it as a Rails app. Yeah. We'll probably have some programming model that makes sense for those systems a lot more than what today would be considered a traditional monolithic app. So yeah, I'm pretty sure microservices are still a question that, like, should I do microservices is a question that people ask for the wrong reasons, because they fail to realize that a lot of the difficulties have been mitigated, a lot of the tech has been commoditized. Yeah. And as an industry, I think we will eventually have to learn some of those trade-offs that I mentioned in the talk, like cap trade-offs. Based on the laws of physics that we live in, we will have to build our systems in a slightly different manner anyway, and we will learn that as an industry. We will intuit that. Yeah. If today CRDT is for most software engineers this cool thing that they've heard about, but they have no idea like how to employ it or how to use it, I think probably in 10 years, a lot of the things we use, we might not call them CRDTs, but they will be CRDTs. Not because CRDTs are cool, but because CRDTs solve a problem. And if we can as an industry, sort of take them in and make them part of our usual tool chain, we won't be thinking of them as technology. We'll be thinking of them as, this is a solution to a problem that I can easily take out of my tool belt and just apply the way that we do for a lot of different things today, the way that we do for SQL-based storage today.
Yeah, it's a natural choice for some stuff, and it's there when I need it.
And it's not a big deal. Yeah. Whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, communicating with a database and using SQL would have been outside of the comfort zone of a lot of software engineers. Nowadays, it's almost trivial. Project. Yeah, and nowadays it's trivial because it solves a real problem and because it just got commoditized. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure most of the difficulties around microservices will go the same way over the next few years. So the whole question will kind of become moot. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now we might be using different terminology, but you'd have to be quote unquote an idiot to build a traditional monolithic app, because you have the tools that make it as easy to build a microservice-based app or an event-driven app that has all of these different advantages. Yeah. And why wouldn't you realize those advantages?
Yeah. The interesting part is always will be taking those older monoliths and gradually moving them toward newer stuff.
Or not. If you think about it, we're still running, emulators for mainframes that are running COBOL system and a lot of COBOL-based systems in a lot of places because they work and because it's just not worthwhile to replace them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay. Yeah. And I think we will probably end up not migrating a lot of our line of business apps to more modern tech because it just costs less to just keep them running as is.
Yeah, and they keep working.
Yeah,
if they're built reasonably.
Yeah, so on occasion you have to get a very expensive consultant to do a modification to a system that's built in a totally antiquated and totally non-mainstream tech. Yeah. But it's still worth it so that you don't have to keep a permanent IT staff around because it's pretty rare. And that's what a lot of companies do, and that's fair business.
Yeah, you can abstract things away where needed.
Yeah, I mean, my parents just to give an example, my parents are actually still running the same DOS-based software to run their small business in Israel. It's basically like a CRM system that's built in DOS. It's in text mode. I know because I coded it about 20 years ago. And we're just running it on top of DOSBox because what's the point of replacing it? It just costs more in retraining and in hardware and in work to replace it than it is to run it.
Yeah, and once you're inside something like DOSBox, it's pretty much a solved problem for a very long time. Yeah, to keep it running.
Yeah, and we've been doing that, or like I set them up with a modern computer because obviously you can't run an ancient DOS program written in 8088 assembly and and an XT like back in the day. It's very difficult to get it to run on modern hardware. Yeah. Fortunately, you don't have to. You just get an off-the-shelf laptop, set up DOSBox, you're done. It works.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. So I think a lot of businesses will keep doing that, and a lot of the traditional systems just won't be migrated because there's no point. Yeah. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, you build the additional stuff that's coming up outside of microservices.
Yeah, there's always new businesses, always new systems, and also traditional businesses also have to change. Like a lot of the times, the impetus for rewriting or totally replacing a legacy system in a lot of businesses that are not like tech businesses or software businesses is simply because the problem that the legacy system solves has morphed so radically, like it looks so different nowadays that it just makes no more sense to update or keep the system running than it is to simply build a new system that gives you what you need today. So I mean that's I think the natural order of things, and the only reason why people still find it a bizarre way of doing things is because the industry is so new and people are so used to running after what's new that oftentimes you kind of lose sight of the fact that for the most part, you're solving a business problem. And if the business problem is solved, then there's no reason to run after newer approaches, newer tech, etc. Even though it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. That's dangerous attraction. Yeah, I was talking to one of the guys from IKEA, their IT section earlier today, and
what is it? Building a brand new IKEA?
Yeah, something like that. But it was really fun because they seem to have a really good pragmatic approach to the whole situation of like developing new stuff and adapting old stuff where suitable and so on. And, he told me they started with one mainframe of their own instead of renting one from another company, like in the late 60s or something, and some parts of that code were still running until the late 90s or something like that. I
didn't even realize IKEA was that old of a brand.
No, you see.
It only got international recognition, I guess, over the last, or at least that I've seen over the last 10, 15 years. I think the company itself started in the 40s. Oh, wow.
Originally, the seed of what's IKEA today.
All right, and they're still running a lot of software from decades ago. That's it's combination horrible because as a tech guy, I really don't like big legacy systems and having to deal with them. But on the other hand, that's really cool.
Yeah, and they phased it out gradually, so that super old stuff is out now. But they also weren't into the mode of just we need to rewrite everything because this is old. This part works and this part we write something new.
It's a good thing they didn't, because those types of rewrites almost never work. And, I'm not the first or the last person to say that.
No.
But I think I'm trying to remember who said that way back when. I think it might have been Kevlin Henney. Said something along the lines of software is the only industry in which the word legacy has a negative connotation.
Oh yeah,
it's ridiculous. Like, what does legacy evoke in you? Well, if you think about it, the legacy of Beethoven is a wonderful thing. Why is a legacy system considered to be a pain in the ass?
Everyone wants a legacy, not developers,
except software engineers. And I think it has more to do with just the age of the industry than everything. We're a very new industry, and we don't really understand how to do what we do yet. And for us as individuals, that's a really good thing, because it both means we get paid a lot of money, which is always nice, but also that we get to play with new toys all the time, which is very nice. and we don't have strongly articulated and regulated methodologies in which to do stuff. Like if you want to build a bridge, which is sort of the canonical comparison, there are only so many ways of building a bridge, and if you want to create a new way of building a bridge, that's not something you can do in your basement or not something you can actually do. It's something that if you want, it's going to take you years and years and years and years and years to come to fruition and to see, the first iteration of your work actually out there with cars running over it. Whereas with software, you can just, create a new Git repository and off you go.
Look at this new concrete I came up with in my basement. No.
So it's an amazing privilege that people in this industry have, and I find it kind of sad that a lot of people in this industry don't realize just how lucky we are, not only to be in this industry, but to be in it now. Because in 50 or 100 years, it's going to look completely different and a lot more boring.
Yeah, probably. That was my next question. Do you think we'll actually figure it out eventually?
Yeah. Every industry, every engineering discipline does eventually. I think one example is either the automobile or the air industries. These are fairly new industries as well.
It's true.
They're much older than software to the tune of 50 or 60 years, but they're still reasonably new industries. And I think those industries had to grow up a lot earlier than we did, because the ramifications of doing shitty work is a lot more. I'm not even talking about a lot more destructive, even though it is. It's just a lot more apparent. Because if you screw up a software project, if you introduce a major bug into a system, generally speaking, it's an inconvenience. Right? It might inconvenience someone might lose a bit of money, but you're not gonna watch something flail out of the sky or crashing into a building. Again, some exceptions to that rule. But actually, if you think about it, because say autonomous vehicles are such a huge thing today, if you think about it, we're actually going to be seeing a lot of a lot of that very rapid growing up happening in the next few years, because all it takes is one major incident to spark a lot of discussion and regulation and soul searching in an industry.
Yeah.
And we've had a few of those incidents in the software industry as a whole, but fairly few for now, and mostly in niche things. But as soon as you have whatever autonomous Teslas running around the roads, as soon as one of them just goes nuts and kills a bunch of kids because of a software bug, our industry is going to morph very, very, very rapidly.
Yeah.
And not in a fun way, in arguably a necessary way, but not in a fun way.
Yeah.
So to your original question, will we sort of strike that balance? Will we find a commonly accepted methodology for how to do our work? Oh yeah, definitely. I hope I don't live to see that, though.
Yes, sort of.
I hope I'll be long retired when that happens, because it'll take a lot of the fun out of it for me personally. The thing that drew me to software engineering in the first place is I like to build stuff, and I hate being told what to do. Where do you get to build stuff without being told what to do? The software industry.
It's an extremely strange situation, really.
And it's not going to last. So we are very privileged to be where we are today.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to keep some niches somewhere. I mean, I guess there will always be something that's less structured and less demanding than other parts.
True. I mean, there's always going to be the next industry, right? Human enterprise is not something we've done.
No.
as a species. So there's always going to be the next thing that no one knows how to build. And the airline industry as well. It started off with these grassroots things, just whether it's the Wright brothers or any of the sort of early pioneers, just building stuff and trying them out and occasionally failing and occasionally dying.
Yeah.
And no one cared because it was small and there wasn't much at stake. And then it became the multi-billion industry that we know today, which is why nowadays you can't design a new plane and get it up in the air and servicing people without, I don't even know because I'm not in that industry, but the numbers I've heard are like it takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years from conception of a new design to it actually being rolled out and used in practice.
Yeah.
And there's lots of regulation, and there's lots of laws, and there's lots of verification because it matters.
Yeah.
Software is starting to matter.
Yeah.
So,
and it occurs to me that that's one of those areas you can look at for seeing software with more rigor around it. We actually talked to a developer of aircraft software a while back in the podcast. So he's part of developing software for fighter airplanes. And there are some certifications and specifications and rigors to go through there.
Yeah, I would imagine, and I would hope. Especially living in a country where fighter airplanes are in common use, and it matters. I would expect some rigor where human life is at stake, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
but I think that sort of rigor is slowly making its way into sort of the mainstream software engineering landscape. So one example I would say is take I think it's called A+, I think, the formal verification language.
Never heard the name.
Some companies have started adopting it for verification of very core components. So Amazon notably used it to... No, it's not A+. I'm an idiot. It's TLA+. Amazon have, I think they have a bunch of white papers around how they used it to verify things like their distributed consensus protocols and their implementation of Dynamo. And they actually caught bugs through that technique that they would have otherwise caught, but in a much more destructive way when their systems were actually used to run proper businesses. So that sort of rigor is progressively making its way into the mainstream software engineering. But fortunately, the demand for software is so ridiculously high and so ridiculously higher than the supply of like the readily available supply of software that it's going to be a very long time before a line engineer is required to provide a specification and proof of verification of, say, whatever, the inventory management system for some arbitrary business somewhere.
Yeah, but then again,
but it probably will happen at some point.
And it might happen like piece by piece. Like one of the microservices might be highly specified and verified because it's so essential, and the other parts around it might be less.
That's definitely going to be a step on the way there, but I actually suspect that we're going to have that rigor enforced and regulated everywhere. Because if you think about it, generally speaking, when you consume a service, right, as not as an engineer, but just as a human being living in Western society, if you buy a service, you get a service contract, you get SLAs, you get certain promises, and if those promises are not delivered upon, then the service provider is beholden to that. You might sue them, they might lose their license. It all depends on what industry this is. The software industry right now is exempt from any of that. Like it is almost expected for a software producing company to run over budget, run over time. It's not only that we're a lot more forgiving to that in the software industry. It's got to the point where it's almost like a joke. We almost expect that.
And you made an estimate.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not tenable. Like if right now, if I run a business and I want, say, and again we'll stick to the example of an inventory management system, right? And I want something that's bespoke. That's not like just take a SAP and an integrator and make it happen, but something that's a little unusual. Maybe I'm running a different type of warehouse, or there are certain business requirements that most people don't have. And I go to a software company and I get an estimate, I get a project manager, I get all of these things. I can't rely on virtually any of them.
No.
I imagine that some companies take pride in giving correct or at least not necessarily correct estimates as much as they give estimates that they meet in whatever way. Typically, I suppose like buffering their estimates to the infinity and beyond. That's a terrible situation where we as an industry can't reliably provide the service that we purport to be like. That's our livelihood. That's the service we sell, and we can't guarantee that we'll have that system ready and debugged and installed for you by January. We just can't make that guarantee right now, and that's a pretty terrible situation, and that's not tenable. And the only reason why we can get away with it currently. And again, it's not on an individual level. Like most people are conscientious, they work hard, they try to get things done. But as an industry, we don't have the rigor to get that done properly. The reason we get away with it is because technology and software specifically is an enabler to business scale such as humanity has never seen before. And no one knows how far it can go. And more importantly, if you need that to enable your business to scale, then you don't really have much choice, right? It's going to be late by a month or a year. You will wait for it because you have no other way of getting what you need to scale your business.
I mean, and also on the other side, I guess everyone, inside and outside software, interacting with software, are at some level learning what to ask for and how as well. Because I mean, part of the reason things run over time and budget is we discover new stuff and demands change and people have demands that collide with each other. I mean, it's some part of it is sort of a human nature problem almost.
Some of it is, but I think if that's sort of an innate thing to specifying a project, then it would be equally innate to specifying any other project, right?
Sure.
You're getting a contractor to build your house. Why is it that it's not as big of a problem there than it is for software? But
then again, there are problems when that happens as well.
Of course.
It's interesting to try to think how much of it we'll be able to remove
kind of mitigate.
By growing up basically, and how much will remain. It's
probably most of it, and then things will probably never be perfect because things never are perfect in any industry.
No, as long as someone wants something that's to some degree new, there will be more uncertainty and more.
If it's not a commodity product that you're buying, then obviously there's always that. I don't even want to call it a fudge factor, but there's always that question that you have of whether I actually know what it is I'm building, whether I'm building it right, whether it's going to be on time. There is no silver bullet to that. But I think a lot of what we do is going to be commoditized. And I think a lot of what we do that's bespoke or ad hoc for any given customer, more and more of it will be like well known. More of it will be a solved problem. So if you need a custom inventory system for your business, then right now the whole of the project is brand new and unknown. Right, you have a software engineer, ideally a good one, that would pick. Okay, I'm gonna pick these technologies that are proven. I'm gonna build it in an event-sourced way. Whatever, we have a few problems that are solved problems that are like well known, and then still 90% of the project is just a complete question mark. You have no clue how to build it. Every single time we build it anew in different and exciting ways. So I think, for the most part, we'll be converging on a knowledge base, a shared knowledge base of this is how these things are done. Same as any other industry. Like if you're designing a car, every car is a little bit different, but a wide percentage of it is these are things we know how to do. You can even get them off the shelf. 80% of your car is just stuff that you can buy from third-party companies, and or at least the design envelope is so well understood for that you can design around it with confidence. And we're very far from that in the industry, but I think we will get there eventually because we have to. At some point, the demand for software will not be as extreme, or will be met by supply, and at that point, the onus will be on us to actually deliver on time, within budget, and reliably.
I think that's such an interesting thing to try and think about. I think it's really hard to
and
think
somewhat
about.
depressing.
Definitely. It's easy to see a dystopia or something, but I mean, you're right. At some point, there should be some kind of balance in supply
and there will. Because it's a business, and right now it's a new business. There's lots of money in it. No one knows exactly what they're doing. Like even the most successful companies that you can find, for the most part, like you asked 9 out of 10 people, like you asked 10 random people back in 1996 or 1997 or whatever. Like not necessarily people in the know, just people in the industry. Are they going to be successful? And you'll get wildly different answers, and every single one of those answers would be a guess. Like, why would anyone in the late 90s think that Google was going to take over the whole search market? Why would anyone in the early 2000s imagine Facebook would become the behemoth that it is?
And making money as well.
And there were companies providing streaming music before Spotify. Why was Spotify successful and they wouldn't? So a lot of these questions we can't really answer because we don't yet understand it. And there will come a time when it will be much easier to determine what will and will not be successful with respect to technology, because technology and specifically software will be better understood collectively. Unfortunately for humanity, and fortunately for us as practitioners, we're very far from that point yet. Which is why we get to have fun.
Exactly. But it's really hard to tell. I mean, it might come gradually at that point, or it might come all of a sudden.
I think it'll be a bit of both.
Probably.
It'll be gradually because it just comes gradually, and there'll be sudden spikes because of horrible incidents that have to do with just piss poor software engineering practices. It's only a question of time. And there's been there's been a few incidents before, right? I mean, software crashed space shuttles before. But because it's such a new thing, and because it's essentially any space mission is a research project today, humanity is still fairly forgiving towards these screw-ups, but that's not going to last forever. So enjoy it while it lasts, gentlemen, and get paid well for it. We are very, very, very lucky.
And don't complain if it ends all of a sudden.
No, complain. Complaining is an innate human right. If I didn't get to complain, I would be very sad. And then I'd complain about not being able to complain.
I mean, that's always something. That part we can figure out easily. It's an exciting time.
It is an exciting time. It's the golden age of software engineering, and once again, I'm very far from the first person to say this. There have been a number of other people, including I think actually Uncle Bob said that a few years back, where in one of his talks. I could be wrong or misattributing this, but if I remember correctly, he was talking about much the same thing, where we as an industry will be regulated eventually, and until that comes, we're in a golden age of experimentation, and I think the word I would pick would be tomfoolery. We can we can basically do whatever the hell we want, and there's very, very, very little oversight. Like we're not. You can totally bungle a software project today, and it won't be the end of your career, and you will still be in the top 10th percentile of salaried employees out of any industry. So that's an enormous privilege, and fortunately one where it doesn't seem like we're taking advantage of that privilege knowingly. And it does seem like, for the most part, just take a look at this conference. You have like 1,300, software practitioners coming in to learn how to do their job better. So you have a lot of people that most software engineers actively want to get better at what they do. They want to produce better software with fewer bugs to more clear specifications, faster and cheaper, so that our customers can be happier. Everyone, for the most part, wants that. Very few people are in this industry just because it pays well. And as much as I like that it pays well, that's not what brought me into this industry. I just want to engineer things and do a good job of it. And I feel most people are like that in this industry. But that doesn't change the fact that most of us just don't realize how lucky we are to do what we do in this day and age, and not, in 20, 30, 40 years.
Or 30 years earlier, for that matter.
Or 30 years earlier, in which case we probably wouldn't have had the opportunities to do what we do. And if we did, then it would be a much smaller and, shall we say, a lot less diverse a club to be in.
Yes.
So this is a very exciting time to be a software engineer, and as an industry, we're learning every day, every week. There's also obviously I've never experienced the budding years of any other industry, so I don't know what it looked like, but I suspect this is because of the internet and, the ability to have global communication, etc. I suspect probably this is the first industry where knowledge sharing is such an innate, almost like a principle of most people in it. It's a thing we do. We do it oftentimes for free. I mean, no one in this conference, some might, but generally speaking, no one in this conference is speaking because they get paid to. They speak because they like it. They speak, it's not all altruistic, right?
No.
You do get...
You get something out of it.
You get something out of it, but whereas some of what you get out of it are like brownie points and things to put on your resume and networking effects and all that stuff. Like obviously I get something out of it.
Yeah, of course. But
beyond that, it's fun to share, it's fun to argue, it's fun to discuss. And the end result is everyone improves. The software we build does become better. We know more about how to build bigger and more complex systems than we did 2, 5, 10, 20, however many years ago.
Exactly.
And that's amazing to me. And also, if you think about it, the industry is also growing. It's not just the fact that we're getting better. It's the fact that more and more people are coming into this industry. And the bar for being a software engineer, the bar for actually producing useful pieces of software for businesses to run is immeasurably lower today than it was even 10 years ago. You didn't have 9 million engineers, software engineers in the world, 30 years ago, let alone 9 million Java engineers and plus however many millions of JavaScript engineers. So the industry is growing at a mad pace and is growing up at a slower pace. But it is growing up and it's all for the better. Everyone wins. even though we will eventually not get to have as much fun.
Yeah, we'll be grumpy about it.
Yeah, well,
for sure.
Then we'll just have to go back to our basements and build the next industry that no one can envision.
Yeah.
Because, this industry came out of, not out of software engineering, it came out of electrical engineering. It came out of people just playing around and wanting to have their own machines to fool with.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next industry will probably be something along those lines as well, and none of us can imagine at all what that would look like.
Yeah, and that's part of the excitement.
Yeah. And when we're old and grumpy, we will get to look at all those young whippersnappers with their new modern technology that we don't understand at all. Yeah. And they'll be happy and get to have fun and grow an industry all on their own. But for now, we're young, we're happy. We get to play with toys. Yeah, exactly. And get paid while doing it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Are we making the most out of it?
That is a very good question. I think we are. Or rather, are we making the most out of it? That's an existential question for the ages.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think a lot of people feel the answer to that is no, which is why in the last few years you have more and more software engineers sort of seeking fulfillment. Like they aim to build stuff that's for the betterment of humanity. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's the ensuing, bullshit parade of companies that make the world a better place. Yeah. But then some do. Yeah, some software companies are built on the premise that we use technology to improve the lives of people. Yeah. I think, as much as an industry we deal with frivolity. Mm-hmm. Facebook is not a good example because Facebook is also a communications platform that people use for many things that you and I just don't know about and can't imagine. But whereas a lot of the industry revolves around just idiotic devices that do silly things that are not super important, then again, a lot of this industry circles around making airplanes faster and safer, making mass travel more plausible, making medical diagnosis readily available and cheap, not just for us, but also for countries where medical equipment and medical expertise just isn't there. Yeah. So are we making the best of it? I don't know about best, but we are definitely taking a stab at it. Yeah. So as a whole, I think the industry is going in the right direction, both in terms of growing up and in terms of just growing.
Yeah. We're pretty good at asking ourselves questions as well, so it's a good sign too.
We might be. I don't know. Certainly in this context, in this crowd, conferences tend to be pretty self-selecting groups in and of themselves.
Good point.
You don't go to a conference unless you like to ask questions. Yeah. So I don't know if I'd take anything out of that, but then I don't know. We do seem to have a lot of ability to run retrospectives in this industry. We try to learn from failure. Yeah. It got to the point where, to some extent, we glorify failure, which I don't like as much. On the one hand, it's true that you generally don't learn much by succeeding. No. On the other hand, that doesn't mean you should strive to fail so that you learn. So there's a good balance there that we need to keep. But overall, I think we've grown up. I've been in this industry as a commercial software engineer for what year is it?
Still 2019.
For about 18 years. Yeah. Which actually just made me feel very old. I'm not. No, that's fine. I'm old and grumpy. I just need to come to grips with it. But I've been in this industry for upwards of 18 years. It's changed dramatically, and for the most part, it changed for the better. Yeah. There's more software being written by more people. The software that is being written generally is more reliable and is more useful than the software that would have been written in the early 2000s when I started my kind of professional commercial career. more people are capable of doing more with less. The threshold for getting into the industry, like the bar you need to meet in order to bring value to customers, is significantly lower. I mean, back in the early 2000s, you could build useful stuff with Visual Basic on occasion, but that's still significantly harder than building a line of business software today that would work more reliably at more scale and bring as much or more value to more people. And more people are capable of doing that as well. So the industry has exploded in those 18 years, and it's a very short length of time, but it's already enough to see so many changes. I'm pretty optimistic. I think overall we're getting better and we're getting more self-critical. We're asking tough questions. We're providing answers to some of those questions, which we couldn't necessarily do 10 years ago. It's a good time to be alive and a software engineer, that's for sure. And the cherry on top is we get paid ridiculous amounts of money for that. So, we definitely win. Whether everyone wins or not, time will tell. But I think, humanity overall is won. Humanity looks very different today than it looked 30 years ago. And it's thanks to frivolous things like Facebook that made it easy for, people to connect across continents and across time zones. It's thanks to Google that made it super easy to access virtually any type of information. It's thanks to Microsoft, and it's thanks to Apple, and thanks to Spotify, and thanks to YouTube, and you take name your 50 favorite software companies that have had genuine contributions to humanity. Is everything perfect? No, but overall, I think we're as a species, we're doing pretty well. So I'm fairly optimistic.
Feels good. It sounds like a nice positive point to end on. We covered a lot of ground.
It is. If any of my fellow Israelis or my friends are listening to this, they're probably having a stroke right about now at just how optimistic this is. I'm usually a lot more ranty. But overall, I'm an optimist. Humanity has never been better. Look at any decade or any century in the history of humanity. And overall, in the aggregate, things are better for everyone by a huge margin. 300 years ago, I'd have been dead at this age because of rotted teeth.
Exactly.
And it's not that, evolutionarily speaking, that's not a large span of time. Just imagine where humanity will be in 300 years.
Thank you so much, Tomer.
All right, cheers.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.